Hello ladies and gentlemen, and happy holidays everyone. As you can see, I'm currently wearing my reindeer suit. I decided to wear this just to kind of get in the festive holiday spirit, or whatever. But anyways, I thought I'd make this short video just kind of discussing, the current situation that we're all dealing with and sort of where to go from here. Obviously this is we're coming up on our second holiday season in the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously I'm sure most of us weren't anticipating this pandemic lasting this long. It's hard to believe it's about to be coming up on our third year dealing with this. The good news is, however, that we're in a lot better of a situation now than we were in previously when the pandemic first began. Back in 2020 when the virus was brand new and it was just rampaging everywhere and there's nothing we could do about it. Obviously a year later, even though the pandemic is still kind of going on, we're in a better position than we were in a year ago. Now we have vaccines, we have treatments, we have a lot of different things that we can now use to deal with it. So what are sort of some of the updates that have happened since last holiday season? You probably remember most people travel for the holidays, most people visit family and friends and do good parties and do fun things. Obviously back in 2020 people were doing that to a significantly less extent. People were social distancing, doing things on Zoom, on teleconferencing as opposed to in person. Now that it's been a year later, though, the situation's a lot different. First major update that happened is obviously vaccines came out. The two big ones being circulated in the United States right now are Pfizer and Moderna. There are some other companies that have some as well, like Johnson & Johnson has another one that some people are using. That one is notorious for causing blood clots, so I don't know too much about that one. If it's still I think the FDA pulled it briefly, it might still be available. And I think AstraZeneca made one too. I don't think theirs is being circulated in the United States, but whatever. So yeah, vaccines are out there, they're available, and obviously when they're first rolled out, the vulnerable or particularly at-risk people got first dibs. So if you were, say, elderly, immunocompromised, or had some kind of condition that made you particularly vulnerable to COVID, you got first dibs on the vax when it came out. And then sometime in April it became widespreadly available to everybody. Now obviously, I was a bit skeptical of taking the vaccine when it was first developed. It just seemed kind of sketchy to me. There's this brand new vaccine out there that's barely tested, with Lord knows what's in it. But I did do research, and I did learn about the vaccines, and I looked up the data for how many people have taken it, because that's one of the challenges with getting in the initial rollout of the vaccine. Very few people have taken it, so you don't have a whole lot of data to go off of in terms of comparing the rate of people experiencing side effects with sort of the total number of people who've taken it versus who's experienced side effects, who's experienced severe reactions from taking the vaccine. When the vaccine is first made available to the public, not a whole lot of people have taken it. You just don't have a whole lot of data to go off of. But now that the vaccines have been rolled out for about a half a year now, we have some pretty good data in terms of who's experiencing what the rates are for side effects and stuff. And when you look at the data, what you find is that if you don't have a condition like an allergy to one of the ingredients, or if you are prone to blood clots or anything like that, for the most part the vaccine is going to be pretty safe. So I guess that's something to factor. I'm not here to lecture you on whether or not you should take it. I think that's your personal decision. But I will say this, that if you are considering whether or not to take it, that's something you should take. That data out there, that is something you should definitely take into consideration, especially with the holidays coming up. A lot of people, like I said, this time of year want to visit family, want to visit friends, want to get involved in different activities. And of course, the more people you have together, the more of a risk there is for spreading not just COVID, but probably any number of illnesses around. So even with that in mind, with the holiday season coming up, you may want to take that into consideration when deciding whether or not you want to take the COVID vaccine, or any vaccine for that matter. Another thing that's going on is a third booster dose was developed for, I think, initially was for Pfizer, but I think Moderna came out with one as well. And that's sort of the thing being debated right now as far as COVID goes. Should you get a third additional booster dose? Now, much research on this aspect of the vaccine. so I don't really have much of an opinion here. I haven't yet taken the booster. I may decide to if like I said, if it ends up being safe and effective. Like, whatever research I did in deciding whether or not to take the initial vaccine is pretty much the same research I'm going to do when I decide whether or not to take the booster. For certain people though, like let's say you're immunocompromised or for whatever reason you are specifically vulnerable to the virus, getting the booster might be a good idea for you. You just need a vaccine to pack a little bit more of a punch. That's actually not a bad idea. And of course, with the vaccines becoming widely available, another thing that happened just recently is Pfizer, I think, received full FDA approval. When the Pfizer vaccine was initially being rolled out, it was under emergency use authorization, which is sort of a more lenient standard than what the FDA would initially oppose on a drug. And that, I guess, made some people skeptical of it. Now that the vaccine has full FDA approval, that may, again, factor into your decision as to whether or not you want to take it. Me personally, as as a libertarian, I'm not I'm not like the kind of pro-government organizations like the FDA, so to me that didn't make much of a difference. One of the reasons you're skeptical of taking the vaccine might be because of the lack of full FDA approval. Keeping this in mind may help influence your decision making. And of course, with all this widespread vaccine availability, another thing that's very, very hotly debated right now is vaccine mandates and vaccine requirements, especially for employers. My opinion is on this specifically in previous video against government vaccine mandates. I don't think it's any of the government's business to force a vaccine onto people. And that specifically comes from something in medical ethics called informed consent. In order to save for some exception, like some rare specific situation where it's warranted, typically you're not supposed to impose a medical procedure onto someone without their consent. You're supposed to get their full consent before engaging in some type of medical procedure. So that is probably the biggest reason that I don't think it's any of the government's business to force a vaccination mandate onto people. Now, when you're talking about a private organization, that's a bit different, because a private organization, those operate on a contractual basis. For example, an employment. When you go and sign up to work for an employer, you usually agree to work however many hours in exchange for however much pay. An employer can stipulate in that, as part of that agreement, that you need to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Now, generally, I'm against that. Generally, I'm against any sort of pressure, any sort of external pressure being put on people to take a drug. But on the other hand, though, I think that there are a handful of circumstances where that kind of makes sense, specifically in the medical field. That's one area where the whole controversy surrounding vaccine mandates sort of came up recently, was in the city of New York, I believe. The governor, I think de Blasio or whatever, issued a requirement that all doctors in New York have to be vaccinated. And of course this caused a lot of doctors to protest or to leave their positions. The thing about, and that's a sort of a debate where I can sort of understand both sides of the issue, because on the one hand, doctors are supposed to work in an environment where things are kept, the general health of the facility is supposed to be maintained. And if you have doctors in there who are spreading COVID around, obviously that's not good. But on the other hand, doctors, especially if it's a doctor that works in the COVID ward and they're exposed to COVID constantly, chances are they've already built up a very strong natural immunity to it. And for them, taking this additional vaccine, taking the additional risks that may come with this drug may not be worth it for them, since they already have the natural immunity from being exposed to COVID. So for them it may not be worth taking that risk. So that's one of the areas where I can sort of understand both sides of the debate. In a specific situation where it makes sense for an employer to require the vaccine, should that employer require the vaccine? Another place where I think an employer vaccination mandate might make sense is at nursing homes or assisted living centers or places where there's a lot of elderly, because all the data shows that the elderly are like the #1 most vulnerable group against COVID. Like of all the different groups out there that don't fare very well against COVID, they're like at the top of the list. So that's one area where I definitely think it makes sense to require vaccines. But again, I think it should be up to the employers. I don't think that's any of the government's business. Like what Joe Biden talked about doing, using OSHA to sort of require that all employers with over 100 employees make their employees take the vaccine. First of all, from a legal basis, OSHA doesn't really have that authority. OSHA isn't a health-related organization or a safety-related organization, so their job is to make sure, machines with moving parts have the proper covers over those moving parts, or that electrical equipment is properly grounded so it doesn't short out, or that there aren't like chemicals leaking that could potentially like ruin your skin or whatever. Their job isn't to police the health decisions of individual employees. So first of all, OSHA doesn't really have that authority. And second of all, this is a common strategy used by a lot of politicians. They'll use sort of administrative agencies like OSHA to kind of sidestep the legislative process and push through whatever policy that they want, because it's a lot easier than having to go through the legislative process where there's an open debate and discussion, and things have to be discussed in an open forum where the public has input, and you have to get people on board with it, and you have to go through committees and stuff. It's much easier to just try and backdoor these changes through an administrative organization, and that's why politicians often go that route. But I just know that it's legally dubious. It also doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense, like what's the significance of 100? Like, is a business with 99 employees significantly less at risk of spreading COVID? So that's sort of the deal with that, the sort of politics of the government trying to force businesses to require vaccines. Now let's say that you are an employee in a position where your employer is thinking about requiring vaccines. Should you, and let's say that you're in that position where your employer is thinking about requiring the vaccine and you don't really want to take it, should you give in and just say, oh well, I'll take the vaccine just to keep my job? Or should you maybe quit that job and maybe put up some resistance? Again, that's going to be a personal decision that falls on you. I don't know the specifics of your situation. I can't really give you advice in that regards. It's going to be up to you to kind of weigh the benefits of keeping that job versus the risks associated with the vaccine. Maybe there's another employer in your area that's not requiring the vaccine that you could sort of lay back. That could be a potential option for someone who doesn't want to take the vaccine if your employer is requiring it. But yeah, that's sort of where we stand now in terms of like vaccines being available, and not just vaccines, by the way. A whole slew of treatments are becoming available. There's a COVID pill that's supposed to not be a replacement to the vaccine, but as sort of a supplement, because breakthrough cases are a thing. You can still catch COVID or experience symptoms even after being vaccinated. Yeah, I don't know. Now, do keep in mind that even though breakthrough cases are a thing and you can still experience symptoms with the vaccine, keep in mind that first of all, that's rare. It's very rare for someone who's vaccinated to experience full-blown COVID symptoms. And even if you do experience some symptoms, they're going to be less significant than they would be had you decided, not to take the vaccine. So don't let the existence of breakthrough cases necessarily deter you from taking the vaccine if you think that's what's necessary for you, obviously. But I do think that the existence of breakthrough cases does mean that even with widespread vaccination, we are going to have to look into different treatment options. I know another thing people are debating right now is ivermectin. I'm kind of hearing mixed results on that from different people, so I'm not going to vouch for that here. I'm just going to say, with the vaccine, when you're looking out for treatments, sort of do your own research and draw your own conclusions. And I guess that's the biggest thing advice I would give people, regarding not just COVID, but any health-related issue. Sort of be informed, to do your own research, and make whatever decision you feel is best. Because a lot of people, in the upper medical cabal, like Dr. Fauci, they think they know what's best, right? And to be fair, that happens on the other side. You'll have conspiracy theorists telling you don't do this, don't take the vaccine, don't do that. They'll also think they know what's best, and you as a rational adult can make that decision for yourself. Now, with regards to where we stand in terms of cases, it does look like the vaccines are effective. Cases are down, hospitalizations are down, deaths and other sort of symptoms have been way down since the vaccine was released. We're starting to see an increase now with the new variants, with Delta and Omicron, but I know a lot of people are ringing the alarm bells like, oh my god, COVID is back, look at all these numbers from like Omicron and Delta. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that, first of all, the vaccine is still effective against these variants. Like, we've seen that even though cases did start to kind of tick upwards once Delta hit the scene, there's still an overall downward trend, which means that even with new variants coming out, the vaccines are working. Another thing to keep in mind is that the newest variant that people are freaking out about, Omicron is actually the least deadly variant. Like, there's yet to be a single confirmed case or death due to Omicron. So, and I think that what we're seeing is the trend here is that a lot of the new variants are becoming less potent than the original virus. And I think the reason it's happening is because of basic biology. You know, living things want to procreate as much as possible. That's the goal of a virus. The goal of a virus, like anything else in biology, is to reproduce as much as possible. And obviously, if it's killing its host, right, if you catch the virus and it kills you, then obviously it can't spread as far, it can't reproduce as much. So it kind of makes sense that the virus would evolve. Natural selection would favor viruses that are friendlier to its host, because that gives it more of an opportunity to evolve. Now, in terms of going back to the politics for a second, there's still a lot of hysteria out there. There's still mask mandates on airplanes, which unfortunately, if you're one of those people planning to travel for the holidays, you'll probably have to deal with that. It's kind of dumb though, because even airline CEOs are saying, hey, this is dumb. Like, the airline mask mandate's been extended to March. So anyone traveling this holiday season will have to deal with that. But the good news is that there's some pushback on that. A lot of airlines are saying, hey, look, this isn't helping. Because we know that airlines are probably, airplanes are probably some of the safest places in a pandemic, because you have HEPA filtration, air is constantly being circulated. So airplanes are actually one of the safest places in terms of your probability of catching COVID. And a lot of places are still implementing mask mandates. A lot of liberal Democrat leading cities are still saying you have to wear the mask even if you're vaccinated. And the problem here is that that's just kind of creating more skepticism toward the vaccine, not less, because now people are going to ask, well, hey, if I still have to follow all these precautions and stuff, even if I take the vaccine, is the vaccine really working? So I think that this push to kind of keep these restrictions in place, even with the vaccine, is going to cause less people to want to take the vaccine. So that's just something that if you are one of those people who supports, we need masks, even though there's a vaccine, keep in mind that that's one of the potential downsides of you sort of pursuing that train of thought. Other than that, though, I think that's pretty much where we stand. So everyone, do enjoy your holiday season. Now that vaccines are out and cases are down, it's probably safe to start meeting up with family again. But just do be cognizant that the risk of COVID is still out there. I would recommend getting vaccinated, maybe getting tested, wiping things down, and just try to be safe this holiday season and enjoy yourselves. This has been Philosoph Possum, making stupidity play dead. Take care.